So it's time for My Give a Damn's Busted. So we've got more of the book to go, so take a deep seat. I hope to finish this book with you by tomorrow so we can start in on Country Strong. But we'll just have to wait and see. Here's page 197. Larissa peeked out, the fish-eyed in the hotel door, sighed and opened it. She hoped for half an hour to get ready for her mother, but she was there and she had no choice. She slung the door open and stood to one side. "Hello, Mother." Doreen flowed into the room with the grace of seasonal ballerina. She stopped to air-kiss Larissa on the cheek and kept going until she reached the overstuffed recliner beside the window. She sat down, crossed one leg over the other, and smiled. "You look like hell." "Only a man can make a woman look so horrid. What's his name?" "And you look like your usual young, lovely self." Larissa picked up a bottle of expensive water from the top of the entertainment system, twisted the top off, and downed half of it. Her mother's red hair was short this time and framed her perfectly oval face in springy curls. Crow's feet were beginning to play around her eyes. Was that the bit of flesh under her chin a wee bit saggy? Oh, dear. Was Doreen going to look her age? "Don't be bitchy with me because you've got man problems, darling," Doreen said in her sweetest southern accent. Page 198. Larissa blushed at the unkind thoughts. "Sorry, Mother. How was your trip?" Doreen's smile was brilliant. "Lovely, and I can't wait until you meet Rupert, but we'll have conversation about him later. Please tell me you've given up this crazy notion of living in a pigsty and you've gone back to Perry where you belong." "Can't. It would be like living a lie, and besides I like my pigsty. The mud is warm and the food trough is always full," Larissa answered. Doreen sighed. "I painted my house turquoise with a hot pink and yellow trim. It reminds me of those islands," Larissa said. "I bought a picture of it in the honky-tonk. I'm not sure I can stand to look at them. Why would you turn your back on everything? It doesn't make sense. How can you do what you're doing when you could have a decent lifestyle? You know how we always loved that little cafe on Rue de la Bastille, and all those little nice places." Larissa remembered talking with Hank about that very cafe. They would have been good together in their other lives. She as the rich heiress to her grandfather's fortune, and Hank as his mother's son. But those lives had been left behind when they became Hank and Larissa. She shrugged. "It makes perfect sense to me. I'm starving. I worked last night and had a piece of cold pizza for breakfast at noon. Let's have lunch at that little cafe downstairs and then go shop until dark," Larissa said. "Now that sounds like a plan. That I've asked Rupert to meet us at the late dinner at 560 in the Reunion Tower. You're going to like him, I promise," Doreen said. Larissa finished off her water, made sure she had her room card, and held the door open for her mother. "I didn't bring a thing for the fundraiser. Is it very formal?" "Black tie tux. I'd say long, silky black. My friend has a son I'm dying for you to meet. He's handsome, educated, and would be a fine catch. We'll shop for something for you to wear to dinner tonight, too," Doreen said. Larissa pushed the down elevator button. "I'm not interested in anyone. I've just come out of a bad relationship." Doreen shivered. "What better way to get over it than meet someone new? You look more like your father every day, Larissa." "And where is my father?" Larissa asked as they stepped into the glass elevator that moved slowly to get to the ground floor. Doreen brushed the imaginary lint from her silk pant outfit. It was the same shade of the emerald green as her eyes and sported a diamond brooch with a center stone that glittered in the light flowing through the spotless elevator glass. "We'll talk about your father over lunch." Larissa jerked her head around to look at her mother. The door opened and several people waited to get on the elevator, but she just couldn't move. That was 198, 199. Here's 200 and 201. "Seriously," she said, "I expect it's time. I'd rather have this conversation over a table than in an elevator with people watching and listening," Doreen said softly. "Yes, ma'am," Larissa said. She and her mother moved out to the right of the cafe, where they were seated immediately at a corner table. Larissa looked over the menu, and the waitress brought and waited for her mother to begin. "I'm having a Southwest salad without croutons and a glass of white wine." Doreen handed the waitress the menu. "Chicken fried steak with all the trimmings, same wine as Mother ordered," Larissa said. "This is your mother?" the waitress asked. "Yes, ma'am, it is. She had me when she was barely 2 years old. It was a miracle," Larissa said. "Y'all are teasing me," the waitress laughed. "You aren't even kin. Just good friends out for a weekend of fun. No way you two are related. You were right, Larissa said. Biologically, they were mother-daughter. Doreen had birthed her at the age of 20 and then left her in the care of her grandparents and nanny for the rest of her life. They were really more like friends than close kinfolk. Okay, you've bugged me for years about your father. I guess it's time I come clean. I lied. Now, let's have dinner and forget about all this. Larissa shot a look at her. That's not nearly enough. Talk, Mother. That looked just like him, Doreen laughed. And Doreen sighed. And, okay, I never married your father. It was a college fling, and I really didn't want to have you, but my mother caught me up chucking in the bathroom too many mornings. I told her not to worry. I wasn't going to ruin the family name, that I was going to take care of you as soon as I found a doctor. Larissa's face turned ashen. Oh, don't look so shocked. I didn't do it because I might have, but I might have if Mother or Father hadn't ganged up on me. According to them, what would have been covering one mistake with another? There might be a time when I wanted children, and an abortion could have long-term effects as a problem in having another child. So I went to Italy to study for a year and then came home. It was with you in tow. The story was that Daddy paid for the father off and we got a divorce. It was an easy one to stick to when you started asking questions. I figured he or Mother would tell you when you got older. Larissa shook her head. No, and go on. You look like him. You didn't get a blessed thing from me, not my hair, my eyes, or my build. He was jet black hair, brown eyes, and he was lean and trim. Never had to watch how many beers he drank or how much he ate. Worked out in the gym all the time, played ball, listened to that horrid country music. His name, Larissa asked. Can't we just leave it alone at that? That was page 200, 201. Here's 202 and 203. No, Mother, I want to know his name. The waitress set the food before them. Enjoy your meal. Shall I get you another glass of wine? No, I'm fine, Doreen said. Maybe a glass of water with lemon, Larissa said. Doreen forked a small bite of tomato into her mouth. She hadn't spoken the man's name in almost 30 years. The only time she ever thought about him was when she made a trip to Perry to see her family. His name was Lawrence Morello, nicknamed Larry. We called him Morley most of the time. I named you Larissa, so there would be a little of you in him. Your middle name was also for my grandmother, but you know that. Morello is an Indian. It sounds Hispanic. Hell's bells. No wonder she couldn't locate the man. She'd been looking for Morley instead of Morello. It is. His father was about a quarter Mexican or maybe even less, but the Morello name had come down on through that line. His mother was Indian. He came to OSU on an athletic scholarship. We had a fling. I went to Italy. I suppose he went home. I never saw him again. Lawrence Morello. Spell it. Doreen did very slowly. So now what? Are you going to hate me? I didn't put his name on the birth certificate because I didn't want you to know. What are you going to do? Find him eventually, but today we're going to eat this good food, go shopping, meet Rupert, more shopping tomorrow, and go to a fundraiser tomorrow evening. Life goes on, and you don't have to know what or if I find out anything, Larissa said suddenly, even hungrier, and dipped heavily into the mashed potatoes. Thank you. I don't want to know. I don't want Rupert to know either, so you keep whatever you find out to yourself. Thank you for not hating me and for understanding, Doreen said. I didn't say that. I don't understand any of it, but I don't hate you. Eat your salad, Mother, and we've got to find me something all fancy for tomorrow night, Larissa said. Doreen smiled brightly. You'll look fabulous, and my friend's son is going to drool when he sees you. Larissa put a hand up. Not interested, especially if he's a moron who drools. God, Mother, I live in a small town, but there's lots of menfolk who'd be happy to take me out, and not one of them drools. Doreen's giggle was high-pitched. I didn't mean that. He was mentally challenged. If he's so damn fine and good-looking, then why is he not a notch on your bedpost? Larissa asked. Because he's been too young for me until now, because his mother is one of my best friends, and that would make a mess. And besides, I'm in love with Rupert, Doreen said. For real? Larissa could hardly believe her ears. I think so. And what does Rupert do? Is he a trainer in a gym? Or a lifeguard in a 5-star hotel pool? Larissa asked sarcastically. Doreen giggled. I won't even fight with you over that, Barb. I might have even deserved it, but I'm not telling you a thing about Rupert. I'll just let it be a surprise. That's 202, 203, and 204. Moving forward to 215, 216. She wondered where he was that rainy night in Dallas. Was he working late in his office? How far was he from her right then. Was he watching that gray clouds drop of buckets of water on the town from the window in his corner office? Had they found another small town to buy for their amusement park? Her cell phone rang. Hello. She picked up her purse and started for the door. Larissa, it's Hank. Do you have time for talk for a few minutes? She stopped mid-step. She had been expecting to hear her mother's voice, not Hank's. The old adage about thinking about the devil and he will appear came to mind as she sunk in the recliner beside the window. Are you there? He asked. I'm here. Why are you calling? She asked. Can we meet and talk? Hell no, she said. I'll meet you anywhere. The honky-tonk, your front porch, the lake, the Dairy Queen in Stevensville. I just want to talk to explain now that there's been some time and I need closure if nothing else, he said. I can't think about that tonight, Hank. I'm about to leave, and honey, you don't deserve closure, she said. Are you leaving Mingus? Where are you going? Will you have the same cell phone? His voice sounded frantic. No, of course not. I would not leave Mingus for half the dirt in Texas. I've got plans that aren't a bit of your business, and I have to leave now. Is it another man? Have you found someone else? He pressured. Like I said, it's none of your business, is it? Can I call again? Give it a week, she said. Okay, 1 week from today, then goodbye. She flipped the phone shut. Closure? She needed it more than he did. But meet and talk wouldn't bring her a bit of closure. It would make her want him more. She shut her eyes and remembered the day at the lake and how his body felt next to her in the cool water. The afterglow when they made boom boom and the sweetness of the sleeping in his arms, wrapped up in a blanket like they were in a cocoon. She wouldn't have admitted it was to Charlene for a chunk of the moon, but she had begun to wonder if the curse of the honky-tonk had fallen on her and Hank Wells was the cowboy who would take her away from the bear joint. But most of all, she missed her friend Hank, the man who teased and laughed with her while they baled hay, while they painted her house, and who bickered with her and argued with her. She shook her head to clear the memory. Then she carefully tucked an errant strand of black hair back into the French twist that the hotel beautician had styled that afternoon. She'd think about it for a week and then decide if she could see him. If not, she'd put it off again. It wasn't as if she was sitting around in her pajamas eating chocolate and setting herself up for boys in the white jackets to come take her away. She had a life in Mingus, and the honky-tonk even at her heart was shattered. And she would go on living her life among her friends. Betty, Linda, Janice came over several afternoons a week for a cup of coffee and to catch up on the local gossip. Charlene was becoming her fast friend at the honky-tonk. They commiserated together when Hank, a.k.a. Hayes, left after the meeting. Charlene called him every name she could think of, and then starting on the creative ones that combined swear words in the ways Larissa had never heard before. That was 216, 217, 218. If you notice I'm skipping some pages, that's because I want you to pick up this great book and you to read a little bit. So I'm making you go, what happened in all those pages she skipped? Page 224. She looked at the bids and sucked in air. She looked up at the canvas and couldn't see anything but chaos in the work. Lopsided splotches of color that resembled a piecework quilt made a domestic manic depressive who finished it and then drizzled a pint of blood on it. She tilted her head to one side and squinted. Maybe it was a jigsaw puzzle put all together wrong. She turned to the other side and squeezed her head and shut her eyes tight until everything was one big blur. Now it made perfect sense. It was a page from a kindergarten's coloring book that he had at McDonald's Happy Meal for a dinner while he was coloring it. The ketchup packet got caught between his lunch pail and the desk and squirted irregular lines all over the page. Larissa could almost make out form of one of those new kids' toys called a transformer if she shut one eye completely. A blond-haired man with wire-rimmed glasses who had taken up residence beside her said, "Exciting, isn't it?" "Are you looking at the painting?" Larissa had been so engrossed in trying to figure out how that could be art that she hadn't even realized anyone was still around. He nodded. "Well, I suppose you could call it exciting. There's lots of color." His eyes glassed all over it, as if it was a Puritan who had been transported ahead in time straight into a bar with pole-dancing girls. "Yes, the color is fabulous. The light is perfect. I can picture it above my sofa in my loft apartment. I put a bid on it. Would you like to see it in a place of honor when it's mine? By the way, I'm Thomas Whitfield III. Most folks call me Whit." "I'm glad to meet you, Whit, but I'm not from Dallas. I live up in Mingus. I'm from Palo Pinto County and own and operate a beer joint called the Honky Tonk," she said. When he got a hold of his jaw and brought it back up to clamp tightly shut, he turned heel and left her standing there surrounded by a dozen other people. But I thought someone said you were Doreen Lawson's daughter. A 30-something lady joined them, and she had blonde hair, a long face with a nose that was slightly too big, and dark eyes. She was taller than Larissa and heavier, but wore her black sheath dress with draping neckline very well. Larissa reached out and took a flute of white wine from the waiter's tray. I am that. You don't look a thing like her. Are you her daughter or the child of that Italian fellow she's with tonight? No, Rupert is not my father, but Doreen Lawson is definitely my mother. The woman looped her arm through Larissa's and led her away from the painting. Hideous, isn't it? My name is Julia. I put the first bid on it so Aunt Martha wouldn't disown me, but thank God I was outbid quickly. I'd rather hang a velvet Elvis in my living room than that thing. Come sit with me and we'll scope out the good-looking Texans. If it don't wear out a western cut tux, I don't even give it a second glance, and the cowboy boots are a plus. That's 224, 225. Here comes 226 and 227. You should make a trip to Mingus if you like cowboys. First drink at the honky-tonk is free for getting me away from that thing. It's like a gory movie. You don't want to look at all that carnage, but you can't blink, Larissa said. Julia giggled. You got it, honey. I've heard that of the honky-tonk. I've got some friends who've been up there. They say it's vintage. Maybe I'll collect that beer sometimes. I could have kissed you when you told that wit that you owned a beer joint. That look on his face was priceless. Larissa sat down on a newly vacated sofa. You don't like him? Julia sat beside her. Oh, I'll probably end up married to the man. Mother wants me to marry him, and his dad thinks it's a wonderful idea, but I'd have to train him, and I don't know if I've got the patience. I'd much rather have Hayes Radnor. Have you heard of him? Larissa inhaled. A couple of times. Now there's a man a woman couldn't have to train. He's like a brand new house. Turn the key, start living. Julia fanned her face with her hand and then turned on the air conditioner because it will really be some damn hot living. Larissa raised an eyebrow. Oh, really? Julia went on. Good-looking, dresses just right, rich, and honey, if I ever get him into bed, I just know he'll make my little old toenails curl up and sing. What will they sing? Larissa asked. That song that they always sing when the bride is walking down the aisle. Julia laughed again. Well, good luck. Whit picked 2 glasses of wine from the waiter's tray and carefully carried them to the sofa where Julia and Larissa sat. Julia, darling, I noticed you didn't have a drink and I brought you one. Did you make a bid on the painting? It's really not fair if you get it because Martha can paint you something any time. She's your aunt, after all. Julia took the wine and sipped it. You outbid me, you rascal. I suppose you'll donate it to the new art department if you win the bid? I hadn't planned on it, but that is a lovely idea, he said. There's my mother and father at last. I'll be back in a minute. I've got to tell them I've already entered a bid so they won't bid against me. Why would you do that? Larissa asked. If I do marry him, I damn sure don't want that thing staring at me every day. It was self-preservation, Julia whispered behind her hand. A tall, dark-haired man stopped in front of them and touched Julia's shoulder. Hi, darling, I thought you might be here. Larissa looked up to see the bluest eyes she ever seen. His hair was so black it was a blue. When the lights from the chandelier hit it, jaw was square, exactly the kind of man who appealed to her in the pre-Hank Wells days. And who is your gorgeous friend? Maybe it's Ryan Paby that they're talking to. That was page 236, 226, 227. Here comes 228 and 229. And this is Doreen's daughter, Ruth. Larissa extended her hand. I prefer Larissa. It's my first name and the one I'm used these days. He brought her fingertips to his lips and brushed a kiss across them without blinking, his full attention riveted on her face. This is Larissa. It is, then. I'm Tyler Green. She withdrew her hand. Pleased to meet you, Tyler. That warm, oozy feeling in the pit of her stomach just wasn't there. He was pretty. He was a true knight in shining western-cut suit and had high-dollar boots, but it did nothing to excite Larissa. She was reminded of Jody Messina's song, My Give-A-Damn's Busted. Had Hank really broke her give-a-damn so badly it couldn't be repaired? Was there no other man on the face of God's green earth who could make her melt into a puddle at his feet? I'm going for food. Want to join me? Tyler asked. Larissa shook her head. No, thank you. I'm not a bit hungry, and Julia and I still have some catching up to do. Then maybe later, Tyler said. He's a player, Julia said when he was not in hearing distance. Larissa smiled. Well, I don't reckon he's going to play me. Not tonight. How about you? Julia winked. Honey, I'd let him play me like a piano. He's my second choice right behind Hayes Radnor. I bet you I could keep him tied up in the bedroom so well that he wouldn't even look at another woman if he'd give me a chance. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Martha said loud and clear into the cordless microphone. The room went silent and everyone got ready for her fundraising speech. Instead of begging you for money, we're going to have an auction. Don't get your hopes up. I'm only giving away one of my paintings tonight, she said. Julia whispered, thank God. We're going to have a slave auction. Men on this side of the room, women on that side. She pointed and couples began to separate. Larissa and Julia sat while the other women gathered around them. We're going to auction off these men to the highest bidder. Let's see how much you girls want the man who brought you. We'll start with Doreen Lawson's date, Rupert. Doreen, you got your checkbook ready? Doreen waved it in the air. Okay, here's a fine specimen of an Italian, and all you have to know is what they say about Italian men. Martha wiggled both eyebrows. Who's going to start the bidding at $1,000? Doreen raised her checkbook. $2,000. Julia shouted, what are you doing? Raising money for Aunt Martha's charity. It's all tax deductible. How much did your mother plan on donating tonight? I have no idea, Larissa said. This is page 228, 229. Here's 230, 231. 3, Martha asked. Doreen nodded. 4, a voice from the back said. 10, Doreen said. Well, looks like Doreen either knows something we don't or she's planning on finding out, Martha said. Do I hear 11? Larissa looked at Julia. Julia shook her head. That's all I'm donating, and I'm really going to have to buy Tyler. Then 10 it is, Doreen. You get to take him home. I'll expect a full report tomorrow morning at our brunch, Martha laughed. Next we have one of our own country boys, Tyler Green. Step up here and let the ladies see what you have got, Martha said. Tyler took the center stage beside Martha right under the chandelier. He removed his coat and tie to a few bump and grind movements, turned around to show everyone his backside, and shot a grin toward Larissa over his shoulder. Do I hear 1,000? Martha said. Yes, a tall brunette said from behind the sofa. 2. Another woman held up a hand. 3. The brunette nodded. 4. A third woman got in on the bidding. 5. Remember, it comes out for your taxes and goes for a good cause, Martha said. The first woman nodded. 6. A few seconds passed. Now's your chance, Larissa told Julia. Woman number 2 giggled and raised a hand. 7. Remember, whoever buys him gets to keep him until 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Do I hear 7, or does Suzanne get to take him home? 7, the brunette said. $11,304, Julia said. That's all there is in my checkbook, and I suppose he's worth it. Darling, that's all there is in your checkbook until you call the bank tomorrow morning. Do I hear $11,305? Martha asked. All 3 women shook their heads. Tyler slung his coat over his shoulder. The crowd parted for him to stroll back to Julia and kneel before her. I am your slave, darling. Shall we stay at the party, my lady, or do you have other plans? We'll stay for a while. Sit right here and hold my hand, she said. Larissa moved down and he squeezed in between them. Are you sure that's all you want me to hold? For now. We'll talk about anything else later when all these women stop drooling. She laughed. That's page 230, 231. Page 233. Hayes Radnor just walked in. That's who Martha is putting up on the slave box net now. Okay, girls, who will give me $1,000 for bid for Hayes? Martha asked. Suzanne moaned. Damn it, Martha, I didn't think he was coming tonight. 2,000, the brunette said. 3, a blonde yelled. Someone raise it to 4. 5, the brunette said. 6, the blonde yelled. Well, now we have serious bidding war. Hayes, looks like you're either Molly or Emma is going to be yours for the evening. You got a choice. No, I don't. What are the rules and when the evening ends? Hayes asked. Rules are the evening ends at the stroke of midnight. You can either flirt with a woman up until then, or when the party is over, it's up to the 2 of you if it goes on or stops, Martha said. 10,000, Larissa said. Good God Almighty, why did I do that? I didn't even intend to donate to the fund tonight. I figured Mother would take care of it. Looks like we have a third party that has entered the race, and so don't be choosing between Molly and Emma, Martha said. 11, Molly yelled. 233, 234, 235. 11,600, and I'm not bidding $1 higher. That's all I brought, and if I use it all, I don't get that new pair of shoes I want, Emma said. 12, Larissa said. She was in the race, and she was going to have her own Hayes Radnor. It was a small competition for him trying to own her honky-tonk, but it would still be sweet revenge to own him for 3 whole hours, and then he couldn't flirt with a single woman in the ballroom. She would make a lot of the art students very happy, and hopefully Hayes Radnor just as unhappy. 25, Molly said. It's for the arts and tax deductible, Julia whispered. 15, Larissa said. You can have him, honey. Ain't no man worth more than that for one evening, Emma laughed. Do I have anything higher than 15 for Hayes Radnor? Martha asked. Okay, going, gone. Will the voice in the middle of the woman's side come forward and claim your slave? We can't see who's been bidding, or I'd send him to you on his hands and knees for that kind of donation. Larissa stood up and the crowd parted. Hayes couldn't believe his eyes when she started toward him. His mouth went all dry as if he'd been sucking on an aluminum lollipop. He blinked several times. Was that really Larissa? Or maybe someone who looked enough like her to be her twin? He'd know if he could touch her little finger. Sparks only danced when he touched Larissa. Ladies and gentlemen, it looks like our high bidder was Ruth Lawson. She might not look like her mother, but she knows a good hunk of a good-looking man when she sees it. Thank you, Ruth, for your donation. Make him work for every dime of that money, Martha said. Oh, I plan on it, Larissa said. Hello, Hayes. Hello, Ruth Lawson, he said curtly. So that was the reason he couldn't find out jack crap about the woman. She was a different person in Mingus, just like he was in Palo Pinto. Ruth Lawson. Where in the hell had he heard that name? And here it hits him. From his mother. She's been trying to fix me up with Doreen's daughter, Ruth, for at least 5 years. Well, get ready to drop in your first dead faint, Mother, because Ruth Lawson is the tart that your word, not mine, who called you a witch. I believe I own you for the evening. She reached up and untied his bow and led him toward the door with it. The vibes between them humid fairly well, proving that Ruth and Hayes could produce as many sparks as Hank and Larissa. The crowd clapped and whistled as she led him out into the flower garden in the backyard. She heard Doreen tell Rupert that Hayes was the son of her friend that she'd been trying to get Larissa to meet for years. It must be fate, Doreen said. If you only knew how much fate, you wouldn't believe it, Larissa thought. The next man went on the block and the crowd's attention turned toward him. Larissa dropped the tie and sat down on a white cast-iron bench. The rain had stopped and stars glittered around a big round moon hanging in the dark sky. The aroma of the roses mixed with fresh rain and wet grass surrounded her. Water droplets hung on the rosebuds, and full-blown roses were heavy with moisture. That bench is wet, Hayes said. So my dress will get wet, and I'll have the perfect excuse to go back to my hotel, she said. 234, 235, 236. Hayes sat down. Sound like a winning plan to me. So you are Ruth Lawson? The Ruth Lawson? That is so damn funny, he said. Why, and how many are there in this world that you would say, the Ruth Lawson? Because my mother's been trying to fix me up with you for years. You gotta be crapping me, Larissa said. Doreen Lawson is my mother's friend. They've traveled the same circles for years, along with Martha. So tell me, are you Hank or Hayes? She asked. Are you Ruth or Larissa? And where did the Morley come from? I'm Larissa. Mother told me my biological father's name was Morley. She didn't tell me that that was a nickname, and his real name is Larry Morello. I'm still angry at you, so don't try and change the subject. I'm angry at you, too, so that makes us even. What have you got to be angry about? She crossed her arms and glared at him. Same thing that you do. You are Ruth Lawson, and you didn't tell me. So I'm Hayes Radnor, and I didn't tell you. What's the difference? She shook her head emphatically and poked him in the arm with her forefinger. That doesn't make us even. I wasn't trying to find out about you so I could undermine you and your business. My name might be different, but I'm still the same person. You are Hayes Radnor now, not Hank Wells. You were trying to find out about me? He removed her finger and held on to her hand, the warmth shooting desire through his body like an IV of pure vodka. Sure, I don't let any man get under my skin without finding out who he is. There's too much at stake. Your honky-tonk, he frowned. No, the Ruth Lawson stuff, which isn't nearly as important as my honky-tonk. Too many men have hit on me with dollar signs in their eyes instead of love. I always investigate someone I'm interested in. You investigated me, so don't be all acting innocent. She pulled her hand away. Another minute, and she'd be pushing him backwards off the bench into the wet grass and having boom-boom with him under the rose bushes. Thorns in her hind end didn't even sound like a bad trade for a romp in the cool, wet grass with Hank. What is the Ruth Lawson stuff? You've really been to the Café de la Paix, haven't you? And the islands, all those places we laughed about. You've been there, haven't you? You were playing pool and laughing at me. The Ruth stuff is the same as the Hayes stuff, and yes, I've been to those places, but no, I was not laughing at you. I wasn't playing poor. I just wasn't claiming to be rich. Seems you were in the same place. I told you more than you did me, he said, which doesn't make up for the fact that you were Hayes, so don't take that attitude with me, she said. I'm not happy anymore, he said bluntly. Well, don't blame me. I didn't do it. Yes, you did, he protested. I wouldn't carry that burden for that. You did it to yourself. You could have fessed up any time, like at the lake when we were in the water. He grimaced. If it's any consolation, I wanted to tell you. I almost did that day at the house when we were painting, but Charlene arrived before I could tell you. What do we do now, Larissa? Well, if you were Hayes, you can go to hell. If you are Hank, I'm starving, and those finger sandwiches in there ain't going to do a thing to whet my appetite. She didn't tell him that it would take more than physical food to satisfy the longing in her heart. I'm your slave till midnight, he said. Then use your cell phone and call us a cab. Where's a good place to buy some broiled crawdads and Cajun rice? I know just the place. He felt as if he'd just been given a second chance to get into heaven's doors. And this time he wasn't going to blow it. That was page 236, 237, and 238. Y'all been to a wedding? The waitress asked. A fundraiser, Hank said. She pointed at Larissa and said, I figured you were the maid of honor. She moved the finger to Hank. And you, the best man. Guess I lost that dollar bet. What the other party think we were? Larissa asked. Just plain old rich folk. Why you think we were part of a wedding? Hank asked. The waitress pushed a strand of brown hair up under her cap. Because folks that rich don't come in here, especially dressed up like y'all are. You're too old to be out for a prom, and besides, the season ain't right. If you were at a fancy fundraiser, then she was right and I was wrong, and that means I'm out a buck. I'm sorry. Larissa opened her purse and put a 20 in the waitress's hand. Pay off the bet and keep the rest for thinking that we'd been at a wedding. I like that better than being rich. Thank you, the waitress beamed. Larissa wondered if she was a winner or a loser that evening. She glanced at the menu and folded it. The cafe sat between two empty warehouse buildings and a little weathered shack, the sign declaring it to be Crawdad Heaven, swung from the ceiling of the porch. It was painted in stenciled letters with Crawdad wearing a halo at the end of the wording. The place was about to the size of the honky-tonk, with booths along three sides and tables in the middle. Fishy aromas wafted through the kitchen into the dining room, and she inhaled deeply. It doesn't take you long to make up your mind, Hank said. I know what I want, she answered. She looked around at the fishnets hanging from the walls, ceiling with seashells thrown haphazardly into them. He looked across the table. In all things? That's right. Want to expound upon that while we wait on our drinks? That's page 239. Here's 240 and 241. Nothing to discuss. If you are Hank, you know what I want. If you are Hayes, you know how important it is to me. This is a neat place. I wonder if the ladies at home would learn to cook crawdads. If they would, I could put one just like this in Mingus. Any one of those old empty buildings would do a start. I'd finance it, and we could give the smokestacks some competition. I'd best stop thinking about Larissa and Mingus. Ruth Lawson bought you, so I'd better get into character. He reached across the table and laid his hand over hers. I'll always be Hank to you. She shook it off and looked around the restaurant. It's not the Brasserie Bowfinger, is it? No, but then I don't doubt the Brasserie Bowfinger would serve crawdads. You want to go to Italy? We can be there in the restaurant tomorrow. I'll call the airline, book a flight. We can do just as we are and buy what we need there. Did you bring your passport? No, I did not, and I'm not interested in an impulsive flight with you. You broke my heart, but it didn't kill me, so I must be a stronger woman for the pain that it caused me, she said. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me, Larissa, he said. The waitress returned with 2 large glasses of tea, and took their orders for a bucket of crawfish with all the sides. The tea tasted better to Larissa than the wine she had at Martha's house. Guess I've really made that change from Ruth to Larissa, when I'd rather have a sweet tea as an expensive wine, and jeans as boots as this gorgeous dress. I wonder where Hank is in his double life tonight. He said he'd always be Hank to me, but what does that mean? What are you thinking about? He asked. Why do you ask? There's a faraway look you get in your eyes when you're deep thought. You had it, he answered. I was thinking about Ruth, that's who bought Hayes. That's the one I should be tonight. And who is Ruth? I haven't met her. Is she your only alter ego, or do you have many? He asked. only one alter ego, and I'd forgotten about her until I came down here with Mother. Tell me about Ruth, he said. 240, 241, and here's 242, 243. She's my opposite, refined, quiet, well-read, artsy-fartsy, loves the little sidewalk cafes in Paris, gelato in Italy. She wouldn't be comfortable in the honky-tonk, and that's why I've forgotten about her. Tell me about her when she lived in Perry, he pushed. We were quite rich folks, she said. What's that mean? Grandfather wasn't on every board in the town of Perry. He didn't run for county office or wasn't on the board of the college in Stillwater. He made a bunch of money, retired young to enjoy a simple country life. Everyone knew I lived out in the country in a fancy house, but after a while they thought that my nanny was my real mother, and that I lived there because my mother worked there. It was confusing because my mother told me that my father's name was Morley, and all the other kids went by their father's last name. But my mother, my grandfather, and my grandmother, and I all had the same name, and they told me that my father had left my mother when I was a tiny baby. She hesitated. Go on, he said. I existed, and then one day I wanted to live. I can't explain it, but I went on a scavenger hunt to find myself and wound up in Mingus. I went to places where my name didn't matter. I could be Betty Boop and no one cared. It didn't matter if I was rich or poor. My name was Lawson or Morley. I started using my first name rather than my middle one, and I liked who I was when I was Larissa. By the time I met you, I wasn't leading a double life. I was Larissa Morley. He reached across the table and laid his hand on hers. I know that. But you were having a double life. You were there on a mission, and that was to break me down so I'd sell the honky-tonk. You betrayed my trust, and I don't give that to every beggar off the street. He withdrew his hand. I'm sorry, that's all I've got, Larissa. I can't undo it or redo it. I made a mistake in not telling you who I was, but I can't turn back the clock. Why did you want to buy my beer joint anyway? I didn't. Mother did. It's taken 2 weeks, damn good detective, and a lot of phone calls, and I've got it pieced together. Mother and Dad were married when she knew the thing about Ruby Lee. She butted in, What does Henry and your mother have to do with Ruby Lee? Dad was in love with Ruby Lee. He'd met her at a cattle sale in Dallas. He was there to buy, and she was working a second job as a bartender at the sale. They both fell hard, and the heat between them lit up half the state of Texas. Her aunt died not long after that they met, and Ruby decided to build a beer joint in Mingus. She loved bartending more than the office work, and Mingus fit the bill for everything. It was right over the line into Palo Pinto County, which was wet, earth was dry. Dad wasn't very far away, so they could see each other all they wanted. Dad was all for her moving close to him, even wanted her to move to the ranch and marry him, but the proposal had a condition. She had to give up bartending and not build a beer joint. Larissa frowned. Why? She was a bartender when he met her. You don't change people. Page 242, 243, 244. Think back to the 60s. Women worked outside the home, but respectable ones didn't operate a beer joint every night. Dad had a big ranch, lots of money, and his pride got in the way. He didn't want folks to say his wife had a 2-bit beer joint. She refused to marry him unless he let her do what she wanted. She built the honky-tonk. Then he's at another cattle sale in Dallas, and one of his friends invites him to a party, and him and his wife, he meets my mother, who, in her words, had never seen him so much man in a pair of boots. A few weeks later, they flew to Las Vegas for a weekend of fun, and they got married on a fluke. He told her about Ruby Lee on the way home. He says it was clear to the air so they could get off to a fresh start. Larissa whistled through her teeth. Not a good choice. He nodded. Mother refused to give up her company and friends in Dallas. Can't you just see her on a ranch with cows and chickens? She wanted Dad to leave the ranch and go work for her in a corporation. He'd have died within a year in that big city. Mother was jealous of Ruby Lee and afraid that Dad would go back to her since he and her mother were only together on weekends, so you've got to remember how close Ruby Lee was every night of the week. So Mother got it in her head that if she bought the honky-tonk and Ruby Lee could go elsewhere. Ruby Lee laughed at her. It became an obsession, and it never ended. The amusement park was a ruse to rope me into the idea. Mother wanted it. She had the financial investors to back her, so I went for it. I had no idea Ruby Lee played a part in Dad's past until this summer. Larissa shrugged. I see. Life does get tangled up like a fly in a spider web, don't it? Yes, it does. She looked across the table at him, straight into those whiskey-colored eyes that she'd been so attracted to from the beginning. I'm Larissa. Who are you going to be when you grow up? I'm 32 years old, so I guess I am grown up, he said. Not until you let one of us come out and play and tell the other one to take his toys and go home. He tested the waters. Which one would you want to come out and play? Honey, that's your decision. Talk to your heart, not me or your mother or even Henry to make that decision. Until you do, you're going to be miserable. I'm Larissa, and I'm not Ruth. Ruth would like Hayes probably when she got to know him, but Larissa wouldn't. Is that the voice of experience? He asked. She smiled. It is. That's 244, 245. Here's 246 and 247. The waitress arrived with a galvanized bucket of crawdads and poured them into the middle of the oilcloth-covered table. She tied a kitchen towel around Larissa's neck and repeated the process with Hank. That's to protect your fancy duds. Does everyone get this treatment? Larissa asked. Oh, yeah. We protect grease-stained T-shirts just as much as we do tuxedos. We just get more of the T-shirts than we do the tuxes. I'll be right back with your corn and potatoes. Larissa picked up a crawfish, turned it over, and peeled the hard shell away from the white tail meat. She dipped it in the red sauce and popped it into her mouth. She muttered. Good, he followed her example. Better than New Orleans. You ever eat them down there? Never ate them at all, but you were right. They are tasty, like the big shrimp with more flavor, he said. You live this close to a little place and you've never visited it? She asked. One of the secretaries in the office pool is from southern Louisiana and discovered it. She was singing its praises last week, Hank answered. The waitress brought out a platter of corn on the cob, boiled potatoes, and she picked up a pitcher of the nearby workstation and refilled their tea. Anything else for you folks? Larissa shook her head. Then enjoy your meal. She quickly headed to a table where there was 2 new customers seated themselves. Larissa peeled, popped, chewed, and had another ready by the time she swallowed. She wiped her hands on the biggest blue towel and buttered 2 ears of corn while she chewed that bite, and handed one over to Hank, who'd barely gotten the peeling off the tail. Try the corn while it's hot. They boil it and the potatoes in the same pot as the crawdads. It's wonderful. She held the corn in her hands and chewed her way around the sides like a squirrel. He did the same. This is better than finger food at Martha's, for sure. Glad I didn't let Emma or Holly outbid me, she asked. I might have gotten more than crawdads from either of them, he answered. She shot him a dirty look. And that's supposed to mean? He shrugged. That I don't know what we are doing here. You have just as much of a two-people personality as I do. You were so mad at me at the town meeting that you were steaming hot, and then you write a check for $15,000 for a few hours of my time after you refused to meet with me for a talk. You don't want to be Ruth Lawson, but you were acting like her when you left Holly and Emma in the dust of the dollars. That proved to them that you were the daughter of the rich Doreen Lawson. Larissa Morley wouldn't have done that. She would have started the bidding at a dime or maybe even a penny. It had something to say about my sorry butt not being worth any more than that. She might have even thrown something at me. She spit in my eye and told me to enjoy my night with either Holly or Emma or both of them. I liked her better than Ruth, and you are sending mixed signals. She wiped her hands and untied the towel. And I like Hank better than Hayes. From now on you can call me Abe. Why's that? Page 246, 247, 248. Because I'm freeing you. You are no longer a slave, but a free man to go and do as you please, do what you want. Finish your dinner. I'm going home. You are free to finish out your evening with either Emma or Holly or both of them on my dollar and tell them they don't have to send me a thank you note. He thought she was teasing until she walked up to the front desk and talked to the waitress. In less than a minute she was out the door in a cab and gone. He started to run after her, but the cab was gone before he could wipe his hands and stand up. He sat down with a sigh and looked at the food before him. He was still hungry, and he'd have to pay for the dinner, so he might as well eat. She would be at the hotel, or she'd drive back to Mingus. Either way, she still had a cell phone, and these days she was picking it up instead of letting it play the first part of My Give a Damn's Busted. He chuckled. Larissa did have a temper, and it had surfaced, and he was glad. He didn't like Ruth anyway. Granted, she was a knockdown gorgeous in that red dress with her hair swept up on the top of her head, and she put an extra beat in Hayes' heart and made his pulse race, but she wasn't his Larissa, the woman he liked in the cut-off blue jeans with a paintbrush in her hands, or else jeans and a hay hook in both hands. Oh, sure, he'd have the same reaction if he saw her all dolled up in a dress and high-heeled shoes as Hayes did. They were both men who appreciated beautiful women. Hayes would never look at Larissa twice. It would always be Ruth that took his eye. Hank had fallen for the impish woman with a foggy past. Now that he knew where she came from and what she was really doing in Mingus, He admired her even more. Now the problem lying before him was deciding who the man was eating crawdads and corn with his fingers. In the wake of the Hurricane Larissa, he made a decision as he slowly peeled the crawdads. He was Hank Wells, not Hayes Radnor. Larissa was sitting in the middle of the king-size bed eating a hamburger and fries from the room service when her cell phone rang. She checked the caller ID before she answered it. It was Hayes or Hank. She wasn't answering it. She had enough of both of them for one night. "Hello, Mother," she said. Page 248, 249, 250, 251. "I'm outside your door. Can I come in?" "Sure, I'm on my way." She pushed her food to one side, slid off the bed, and swung the door open. Her mother swept into the room in a navy blue silk robe and matching pajamas. "What are you doing home so early?" "How did you know I was home?" Larissa asked. "Hayes came back to the party without you. I made an excuse, and Rupert brought me back to the hotel. What happened?" "I'm having supper. Crawl up on the bed and get comfortable. I'll tell you all about it." "Does Rupert mind you leaving him alone?" Larissa asked. Doreen shook his head. "He's fine." "Tell me before I begin about Hayes. When did he come back to the party?" "He put a bid on Martha's painting that very few people could think was outstanding. When a couple of women tried to talk to him, he said he had been brought for the night, and the rules were that he couldn't flirt. Martha laughed and said she was going to put him between a rock and a hard spot. He wasn't allowed to flirt, but the rules didn't say anything about the loser flirting with him. When he left, Emma and Holly were being absolutely shameless." Or when they left, being Doreen and Rupert. Larissa turned green and laid the remains of the burger and fries on the bedside table. "Those witches! I might scratch their eyes out. What will he do with that painting?" Doreen shook her head. "You can get mad at them if you want, but it's useless. There will always be a witch on the sidelines waiting to see if you're willing to fight for your man. It's up to you to keep them in their place. As far as the painting, he'll probably give it to his mother. She loves that kind of art. She and Martha were into that stuff way back when we were young and in college." "Tell me about his mother," Larissa said. "You were going to tell me about Hayes. It was pretty damn evident that you knew him, or else you wouldn't have bid so high. When you left with him, I couldn't wait to tell Victoria that our children had finally gotten together. She was excited as I was and wanted me to point you out to her, but you were already gone." Larissa giggled. "You go first. My story might keep you from telling me everything you know about his mother." Doreen reached across her and picked up a cold French fry. "If you aren't going to finish that, hand it over to me. The fundraiser food ain't worth a crap, is it?" Larissa giggled louder. "One weekend in Texas, Oklahoma, and your accident and dirty words are already back. It's what Rupert loves about me, so I don't try to cover it up anymore. Talk to me about Victoria while you eat," Larissa said. "Martha, Victoria, and I have been friends for more than 30 years, back before my folks relocated to Perry, where we were all in the same circles in this area. Then Daddy retired and wanted a quiet life, so we went on to Oklahoma, and they stayed here. But once a year, when we were little girls, they'd come to Perry for about a week at the beginning of the summer. Mother would bring me to Dallas for a week toward the end of the summer and shop for school clothes, play with them. Now skip ahead when we were in our 20s. Victoria had just finished college, met a cowboy named Henry, who is Hayes' father. He was 10 years older than her, sexy as hell. Look at Hayes and you'll understand. He's Henry's age, like they say in love stories. He swept her off her feet. They married and they were in Las Vegas and about half looped when she got pregnant right away. It was a nightmare pregnancy and divorce. Probably the catalyst for why I didn't want to marry your father or have you. Anyway, Martha and I got her through the bad times." Doreen stopped long enough to chew up a few more cold fries. "Why was it so bad?" Larissa asked. That's 250, 251, 252. "Henry was in love with another woman, a low-class bartender, and what do you grow up to be, a bartender? I just don't have the heart to tell her that bit of news, even though she and Martha and I have shared everything all our lives." Larissa took another bite of her burger. "Don't the world turn around? Then when are you going to tell Victoria that I own a beer joint?" Doreen set her jaw in anger. "I do not intend to. Damn, Ruth, if she knew that, she'd forbid Hayes from ever seeing you again. You are doing charity work in a foreign country, for all she knows." Larissa, brown-eyed, widened. "You lied to her, and what gives her the right to tell Hayes who he can and can't see? He's a grown man, and he can make up his own mind about his love life. Does she think that he's God Almighty or something?" Larissa ranted. "No, she told someone else that what she's heard, and I didn't correct her. Get on that phone and tell room service to bring up more of these burger dinners. I'll take one to Rupert. I know he's probably hungry too, and Victoria doesn't think she's God, honey. In her opinion, she's far above God." Larissa picked up the hotel phone and made the order. So why was she mad at Henry? Hadn't he gotten over the bartender love thing? Evidently on the flight home from the honeymoon, he said that he wanted to clear the air and tell her more about Ruby Lee. Don't that sound like a hick hooker's name? He said that he would always love Victoria, but he wanted to be honest. Hell, he should have kept his mouth shut and moved to Dallas. He could be the president of the company by now, Doreen said. She's really high on herself, isn't she? Larissa shook her head slowly. Victoria has always gone after what she wants. She wanted Henry, she got him. But she should have waited. Another month and she could have had him out of her system, and then there wouldn't have been a mismarriage or even a baby. Then she wouldn't have had to raise a son by herself or go through a messy divorce. And that's 252, 253. And we're at the last paper clip tonight, y'all. I know, it's heartbreaking, right? Page 254, 255. And that's the end of the reading parts tonight. Okay, now it's my turn, Larissa said. Remember yesterday when you said that I look sad and only a man could do that to a woman? Well, you were right. Larissa went on to tell her the whole story from the time she first hiked a hip onto the bar stool in the honky-tonk through the story of Kathy and her trials until she and Travis finally got together. Then she went backwards and told her mother what she knew about Ruby Lee, had found out about Henry and Hayes and Hank were two men in the same body. And I fell for Hank, the man who is Henry's son and works on a ranch. I do not like Hayes Radnor. He's one son of a witch in every way. Doreen gasped. My God, I just made the connection. She called me and told me about the bartender at the same beer joint Ruby Lee built. That's your honky-tonk, isn't it? Larissa nodded. It is. Doreen broke out into wicked laughter and couldn't control it. She fell backwards on the bed and put a pillow over her head, but that only intensified the picture she had in her mind. Finally, she threw up the pillow on the floor and sat up. Her mascara had run down her cheeks in long black streaks, and her lipstick was smeared. You called Victoria a witch? She said between hiccups. Actually, I called Hayes a bad name, and she told me not to call him that, so I said that he was a son of a witch. And she told her that she couldn't argue with that, Larissa said. I can't wait until Hayes introduces you to her and Ruth Lawson as the brunch tomorrow morning, Doreen said. Larissa cut her eyes around at her mother. What brunch? I invited them to brunch with us here at the hotel before we leave. Martha and Julia, Victoria and Hayes, Rupert, you and me. Larissa slowly shook her head. Tell Martha I hope my money helped. Tell Julia it was nice to meet her. Tell Victoria she's still a witch. I'm going home first thing in the morning. Oh, no, you are not. You might not be Ruth Lawson anymore, and I'm not sure how she'd handle this situation, but I know how the new Larissa would. She wouldn't run from the enemy. She'd stand up and fight, and you will make that brunch. There's our room service. I'll just tell him to take it down the hall to our room. Doreen was out the door before Larissa could argue. Ooh, so I'm going to leave you on that tidbit. How's the brunch going to go? Will there be a brunch? Will Larissa leave? Will Hank or Hayes follow down Ruth and Larissa? Will we have a happy ending? Or will they just leave each other? We've got more pages to find out, and the only way to find out is to watch the book update tomorrow night. You don't want to miss it. What I like most so far, I will tell you that, is that she bit on him, and they weren't able to see her. And when they finally were able to put the connection, well, he was, and they sat down, they both realized that they both were wrong. But they both had to be adults to talk about their mistake. Have they worked it out? Time will tell. More importantly, the book will. So, you got to stay tuned for tomorrow night's book review.